Hi, everybody, and welcome to the SCA Coaches Corner. This is our special edition stream of the Heroes and Traditions series. We're doing our part two of the Kingdom of the East, and we're very lucky to have back as a co-host and guest His Grace Duke Brennan. Brennan, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. And our extra special guest, we've got His Grace Duke Balfar, whom my notes tell me won his first crown in 1991 and his fourth in 2003. But we're very pleased to have him here, and he's going to help navigate us through the 90s and some of the 2000s. So, Your Grace Balfar, thank you very much for joining the stream.
Thanks for having me. This is going to get interesting.
It should be a lot of fun. So in the first episode, we had His Grace Cariadoc and His Grace Visivald and Viscount Sagan reminiscing about the earliest days of the Kingdom of the East. And it was very eye-opening, and we were really excited and honored to have them join us and be a part of this experience, as well as to allow them to just give us all a bunch of really cool stories from the early days. And I think we got into the 80s. And what I wanted to do first was just sort of recap the Ducal fighters from that period. Fighters who made their way and gained a duchy during that period were Siegfried Visivald, whom we had as a guest, Hasdrubal, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Hasdrubal, yeah.
Morgan, Gavin, and Randall. So before we jump into the 90s, is there anything we can talk about, either of those fighters or anyone else that kind of stands out from the late 80s before we jump into the 90s? Balfar, I know you started in that period and kind of got active, definitely in that second, half of the 80s. What do you remember about that time?
It was kind of an interesting time because people were actually coming up with real armor as compared to the carpet and chunks of leather that we were using earlier. And armor was coming up, so people were kind of a little sketchy on how to take shots sometimes, because all of a sudden they were wearing like no fooling real armor. And we hadn't done enough work to figure out what it feels like getting hit in plate legs. So Ouch. It was kind of an escalation of how hard can you throw shots compared to what does the armor actually do. So it made things a little weird in that time period, because there was people that really you had to hit like a train in certain areas only, though.
So when you're training how to do that in this period of mixed match, what are you training for? Are you training to hit carpet? Are you training to hit plate? Or are you training for somewhere in the middle, and you're hoping that the folks that you're hitting are going to calibrate up or down as necessary?
A lot of that depended on who was doing the training. I mean, straight up, if most of us were training accuracy of shots and then basically figuring out how to ramp it up to hit as hard as we humanly could in certain cases. So on average, you were going out there throwing a shot at a power level of about like a 4 or 5. And when you hit somebody and they just kind of look at you and go, nah, nothing on that. You kind of, oh, okay, well, I got more than that. So then you try to step it up. If you didn't have the ability to hit that hard, then usually it was based on speed and accuracy. Those guys are trying to put it like in your armpit or hit you on the inside of the thigh. Stuff like that.
What region?
So what is...
I'm sorry, Brennan, what regions were a little heavier versus, maybe a lighter, and then maybe a more standard sort of for kingdom calibration? I don't know if that question makes sense, but when I grew up in Meridies, for whatever reason, the most northern part of our kingdom, for some reason, had a higher calibration than other parts.
I think that one's for you, Brennan.
No, buddy, I wasn't around in the 80s. I was in elementary school, homie.
You know, I really hate you sometimes.
Only all the time, buddy. That's why we're
Oh,
friends.
you're murdering me, bro. As far as kingdom wide, it wasn't a regional thing. It was more of a what kind of an armor you were wearing kind of a thing. Because certain areas, people were mostly making their own armor. And in other areas, people were buying their armor. So a lot of times, if they're spending money, they're buying a lot better quality than some people can make in their backyard with some leather scraps and some barrel plastic. So the guys, a lot of times, the guys that looked really good, you walked in there looking at them going, oh man, I am really going to have to hit this boy. Look at that armor. Oh my God.
So what does training look like at this point when you're on a Tuesday night or whatever it is, and you're going to practice? What's practice look like?
Well, for us, for where I was, practices were Wednesday nights and most of the day Sundays. Sundays was up in northern Connecticut in University of Connecticut, UConn. And we would draw people in from Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut. Every now and again, you get somebody pop down from like lower Vermont or New Hampshire-ish every once in a great while. But it kind of depended upon the size of your practice. Our Wednesday night practice was generally like 4 or 5 guys. When we got to Sunday practices, that was 10, 20 people there, all in practice. So what you were practicing depended upon the choice and the amount of people that you had there. It was all about quality, because a lot of times when you're working on something new or something you think you can generate decent power with that you're working on, you don't work on that with rookies. Mm-hmm. You just don't. So it's like, if you're out of practice, well, there's me, my buddy, and 4 rookies. And I know what I'm trying to do, and he's only going to take so many of these shots before he taps out. So that was kind of limiting. Once you got to Sunday, usually that's where the big dogs were. That's where you got to sit there and go, I think this will work. Let me see how this goes. And sometimes you got your butt whooped because, well, that didn't work as good as you thought it did. And sometimes your best buddy's laying there on the ground gasping for air, and you're sitting there going, wow, I didn't think that would hit that hard.
So is there somebody sort of leading this chaos, or is it just like go out, find a dance partner, and scrap till your heart's content?
Usually it's go out, find a dance partner, and depending on who your dance partner is how hard you play.
Okay.
Like a lot of times the younger kids coming up would come and call you out. You're like, oh, okay, no problem. We can do this. And you tend to fight to above their level, but that was about it. And every now and then you'd grab one of your buddies and you're like, hey, dude, I got some ideas. Come here, come on over here. Which is usually followed by, oh, God, no, not this.
There's a story I heard of you and Lucan, and he was working on his offside.
Oh, that damn offside of his. Oh, my God, I thought he killed me.
So this is, to put this in perspective as I hear it, and please correct me because I'm telling this story third-handed. This is a time.
I felt the story.
This is a time where offsides aren't a thing yet. Everybody's throwing from like 12 o'clock to about 5 o'clock on the sword side. Is that right?
No. Offsides were really common, but they were only thrown to the head. And possibly like an arm, arm, head, say from the 7, 8 o'clock up.
Okay.
Is where the offsides came in. You follow?
All right. I follow you. Yeah. So what's different about this time?
Lucan is throwing them so they're coming in at your belt, they're coming in at your butt, and they're coming in at that gushy spot under the ribs and above the pelvis. That's where his are landed. And the
Right.
problem is he would do something. It either was a fake or he'd throw a shot that you were forced to block, and then he'd disappear behind the shield. You didn't see him until the weapon came out on that side and just tore you up.
And when is this, like, in terms of years? The late 80s, the early 90s?
I would put that one, when he was working on that one, probably 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know I had already won one. So, and my first one was 91. So I would probably put that around 95-ish at a guess.
Well, let me throw in here just real quick, since I made a mistake and I was looking at the comments, and it's like, hey, you missed someone, one of the Eastern Dukes from the 80s. And I'm like, who'd I miss? And it's like the messages from Ron Simmons. I'm like, crap, it's you. I missed you. So I've corrected it on my little list here, and apologies to His Grace Ronald, but you most certainly were a Duke of the 80s. And
I'm not going to hear the end of this for a while.
And His Grace also wants to point out, though, that he was throwing offsides to the leg and body back then. So Lucan didn't invent it.
Okay. I didn't say he invented it. He just had a really unique way of throwing it. Because of the kite shield he used, he literally would disappear behind the shield. He would throw something, his head would duck in behind that shield, and you're thinking, what's going on? And then your ribs blew up. As a two-weapon fighter, tended to be a little more susceptible to that.
Right. Well, that's a really good segue with, the things that Lucan was doing for us to jump into the 90s and just go ahead and get there proper. I made a mistake of having Ronald stuck in the 90s when he was an 80s Duke. So our list of 90s Dukes would include Lucan, Gregor, some dude named Balfar, Timothy, and Hans. So so let's jump in on those guys. And before we get too far, let's make sure that it's real easy for me. And I mentioned this in the previous episodes. It's really easy for me to look at the who's won crown and those kinds of things. We have written records for those kinds of stuff, but we're not always do a very good job of highlighting standout fighters who maybe didn't go the royal route. And there's definitely some in every kingdom. There's people who just didn't want to bother with being crowned because, it's like work. So,
for real,
or whatever reason. I mean, there's oftentimes a myriad reasons why, you don't choose to test yourself in crown, but you're kicking ass everywhere else.
Our biggest one, the standout that most everybody in the East and a lot of other kingdoms know is Stefan.
Right.
I mean, that man showed up on fire. And he
when did that fire start? So when did he start fighting?
I'm going to guess late 90s.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to go with late 90s. But he hit the scene. The first times we saw him fight, he was already taking out like mid-range fighters and like knights that were on the downside of the age bracket there. So he showed up kicking butt.
He's knighted in 98 for perspective.
Okay, so then the thing is, he flashed through too, because the way he did show up kicking butt. I'm not sure what the stretch was from when he started to when he got knighted, but it was fairly quick.
Okay, so he definitely would be a part of our conversation then for outstanding fighters of the 90s. And even if the 2000s was sort of even a better period for him, but he definitely belongs on our list of where we're just talking about you know just outstanding fighters who were making the scene and setting trends. And as we talk
Well,
about this again, I'll throw out these names of these dukes, but people who are driving training, some of the people who never really get royal status, manage to change the entire way a kingdom can fight just because they have a good way of teaching.
Stefan did that not necessarily because he had a good way of teaching, but he was embarrassing people. I mean, he'd just walk out there and one shot really veteran, good fighters without even a thought. And he also, when he started, Balin was like with him. The two of them were kind of a tag team duo, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever Stefan was, you always found Balin.
And Balin, so I remember in the late 90s is when I started. And to my way of thinking as a kid back then, Balin and you were two of the three or maybe four two-weapon fighters that I just did not want putting that stick in my armpit.
Yeah. That offside thrust that I had developed back in the early 90s was it was particularly annoying to a lot of shieldmen. That one I actually figured out how to do, beating up my squire brother. Oh God, his name just flew out of my head. Torvald. I literally thought that, hey, I think this might work, but I wasn't sure I could hit it hard enough. And then I folded him in half by hitting him in the gut with it. And I went, ooh, I think this can work. He really didn't appreciate that.
So backing up for a minute, I want to talk about the late 80s when you are an unbelt. And
right.
So I come into the game 10 years after this point. And when I start in the game, the thing that I'm first taught is when you get good, you're going to be eligible to be a member of the Unbelted Champions team.
Yep.
Is that a thing for you in the late 80s? Or when does that really start becoming one of the things that all the fighters in our kingdom, as they come up, strive for?
That was already there. That was already there. When I came back in 86, I spent 4 years basically playing Balfars because I hit my first tournament like in 82 and could not get anybody to take a shot. I could hit them and stagger them, but in tournament, nobody would take the shot. I got mad because the people training me were less than competent, shall we say.
Okay.
So I went and just played with foam weapons for 4 years. Came back and realized that I could use a lot of what I was doing with foam weapons and just increase the power level and hit harder with a lot of the stuff I was doing over there. And that's when I had found Edwin, Farrell, and those guys that actually knew how to fight. And things took off kind of quick back then, but that was always the goal. Always. I was put on the I wasn't on the first year that I was kind of going for the unbelts. I didn't quite make the squad. I was on the standby.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was told I was on the squad. A different Duke in our kingdom kind of blew a fit, and I was off the squad. And I vividly remember looking at Farrell and saying, so wait a minute, because somebody else got mad, I'm out? And he looked at me and said, yeah, but don't worry. I said, I'm not worried at all. You just tell me who it is I got to beat up, and they will not be able to fight. He never told me that name. But that's
Well,
what
that,
it meant to me. That's what it meant to me. I was like, I will go find him at Penzik, and we're going to go do some sparring out in the field. And then we'll see who goes out with the unbelteds the next day.
Sure.
I don't know where else besides you guys in the mid realm have that really huge driver like unbelted champions. Yeah, I mean, and I've seen other unbelted kinds of stuff. Kaid has a big Queen's Champion that's like an unbelted champions tournament, and that's a big deal. But just everyone that I've known coming up through either the mid realm or the east, has placed so much importance on, it's as important, if not more important than being recognized and getting an accolade. It's like, you got to get on that team. You've got to earn your spot.
Yep.
And I think that's amazing.
It was so much more
kind of a
important
crucible.
to me. It absolutely is. It was so much more important to me coming up than what is now our grant level fighting award. Like, both of those are goals you have coming up.
Yep.
But
Yep, agreed.
But there's you join a fraternity in a different way, being a member of that team than even joining our Tigers combatant order. And for me, that was what was important, was that the men and women I was putting myself against to the hazard against all the time wanted to say, yes, Brennan is good enough to fight next to me. And so, like, with the first time I was asked to be on that team, I was horribly injured. I could not move my wrist. I was taped from my knuckles to my elbow, and I wasn't telling anybody that I couldn't do it because I had finally gotten the nod. And Her Majesty Anna gave me that tabard, and I wept like a little baby.
Yep.
It's similar to kind of how Callantyr views its Huskarl. I mean, it's like, well, that guy's good enough to be knighted, but he's not ever going to he's never going to be a Huskarl. And it's like, wow, you guys have sort of an odd way of looking at things. But it's just a beautiful sort of benchmark. And I don't think when you're an unbelt, you have that many, actual clear goals that you can achieve while you're an unbelt, like making that team for either of the principal kingdoms and participating in that battle. It's amazing. It's great. And there's been times, I mean, you guys have sure been on either end of these kind of criticisms. Sometimes Penzik War can be taken so seriously. It's not fun for a lot of the people who are going as visitors or guests or whatever. And I've definitely sensed and felt that in places, but I've never cared enough about that when it comes to the unbelted champions. That to me is just a great magical thing that that Penzik kind of created for both of your kingdoms.
Well, and also I think one of the things that really stands out about the unbelted team is the unbelted team very seldomly has any kind of political influence. It's mostly the fighters working out amongst themselves. Okay, like Brennan said, who do I want standing next to me in this? Because I know the people I'm facing are the best that's coming from there. So I want somebody over here with me that I can rely on. No politics, no BS. How good are you?
It's come to a place now, and I really treasure this about our unbelted team, that the captain, I hesitate to say tells the crown who the team is going to be, because nobody tells the crown nothing. But
exactly, yeah.
But I counsel, and I certainly took this counsel when I was crowned, that the captain knows better than the crown what's going on with that team. And you better be damn sure if you're making a substitution.
That's a fact.
So and this is easily one of the kinds of things that's an individual kind of answer for people, but for each of you, what would be more important, making the team or winning the battle?
Winning the battle.
Oof.
Like you saw how
That's a
how
tough
no
call for
time.
me back in the day, because I think for me it was making the team.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I made the team and I fought the best I could, the result is what it is. Now, don't get me wrong, winning is massive. I mean, that's woo, granddaddy. But if I can get on the team and make a difference to the team, that's it. I'm good.
So
That's
I
a
will
that's a very
qualify.
much a more of a pure answer. I like what I'm hearing from Brennan though, because I think it's actually it's one of the things that has driven the competition at Penzic for so long. The winning was really important.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Make no
It
mistake,
is.
it is.
And I want to clarify my answer a little. Like, don't get me wrong, I want to be on that team, but to the point where I have joked sometimes that if I could go back, I would. You know,
Yeah.
I'm, but it was, I think, for more than the belted champions, more than Penzic as a whole, the East Kingdom, and I think to some extent, I won't speak for the middle, but I think the middle too,
Mhm.
like lives and dies with that 2.5 minutes on the middle Sunday of Penzic. The that's the beating heart of martial cult of armored culture in your kingdom. And so if I love like, would I say that winning is more important than being on that team? If I love the kingdom enough that if I have to sit out so that we have that moment as a collective, well, that sucks, but okay, that's what I got to do.
Mhm.
And
True.
that's just like, I know, like when my wife talks about team sports that she loves, if there was one jersey she could wear, it wouldn't be the Knicks, it wouldn't be, the Los Angeles Dodgers, it would be the East Kingdom Unbelts.
Nice. That's really very. I think that's amazing. And again, I guess in a way, I'm jealous that I didn't have that unbelted benchmark as a goal for myself. Where we're from, I mean, we don't have anything that really is similar.
And I think you touched on the double-edged sword of this, and I think one of the things that's really important now is that, excuse me, is that the crowns of the East and the Middle build a Penzic that is inclusive and welcoming and super fun Monday through Friday, and Sunday is when we do our champions battle,
Yeah.
and that's the day for the unbelts, that's the day for the belts. And not that it's win at any cost, certainly you want like honor before victory and all of those things that we hold sacred, but you it's okay for that to be as competitive and leave it all on the field as it is, as long as we build a Monday through Friday that's for everybody,
Yeah.
who drives a long way and spend a lot of time and PTO on being a Penzic.
Yep. One of my proudest belted moments is we got in the thick of it, and I had 3 mid-realm knights decide that they're going to run me down. So I just took off, went out in the middle of nowhere, and got my butt whooped. And as I'm laying there on the ground looking up, I realized we had an 8-man team, and those 3 guys that chased me down were the last ones left. And I'm laying on the ground going, yeah, buddy. Okay, that was worth it. That was worth it to go out there, run out into a field, and get my butt whooped. Because I knew we were winning.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad this conversation dove into that, because it's very much, needs to be sort of spotlighted because that's definitely one of the things that this whole stream was supposed to be about, which is talking about some of the traditions as well as the actual fighters. So, you know, it's unique to yourselves and the mid realm, I think. And I look forward to the conversations I have next month with the mid realm. Probably 2 months when we do the part 2 of that. Because these battles haven't always been around. So we're talking about this period on, where these becomes important. In the comments, His Grace Ronald said that separate unbelted and belted battles came in around Penzic 1485, and
Okay.
also the heroic champions were added at Penzic 20. So that was 1991. So,
that's right. Okay.
So it's very interesting. It's very amazing, So I look forward to seeing if there's any different perspectives from the mid realm side. But I suspect you guys all have some of the same motivations. Make that team represent, win.
Yeah, I think that's been a real revelation for me over the last, I'm going to call it 5 years, as Facebook has really shrunk the known world, just how similar in so many ways the East and the Mid are in this category. Because I grew up, they were the bad, ugly people, and now I'm just like,
they were the
oh
orcs.
no, right? I'm tails, they're heads. We're the same coin.
Yep.
Okay, so my first Penzic was in the early 90s, and I was still an unbelt. And I was just walking around and experiencing the biggest event I've ever been to, and it was great. I didn't have really any responsibilities or anything, so it was just interesting. I'm walking around, I'm a big dumb squire who's still relatively young, and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on with all these sideways belts going from shoulder to hip? As in Meridies, we had heard of Masters at Arms. I understood what they were, I think, but I really didn't. But we didn't have any, and we didn't have a culture that that allowed it to sort of really set root and to come about. So I think this is a good
Hey, I resemble
place to
that.
jump in there and talk a little bit about the tradition in the East, a really strong and rich and great tradition of Masters at Arms.
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it started way before me. For my part of it, from my point of view, shall we say, for me, it was when I was coming up in the SCA, like you said, you were the squire, bumbling around, what's going on. When I was the kid coming up, it was, for me, who did I look up to? Mm-hmm. Where I was, we had Farrell, we had Tierlock, wow, and now my brain shuts off. Bjorn. That was a lot of what we had up north until you got into Boston. Because then you had Kobayashi, you had Sebastian, and you had Tradeness in there. But they were knights. But they really didn't influence a lot outside of the Boston area. When you were going to events like even like melee events, or just going to have some fun at a very common one in Connecticut back in that time period, which was Simple Fair, those are the people you saw show up. Those are the ones that you were watching teach and help people out, and the ones out there doing it.
Right.
And you grow up watching them over and over again. And it's what you gravitate towards.
So who did you gravitate towards that sort of influenced you to take the baldric rather than the belt?
Oh, right. And I'm sitting here mentioning that I forgot to mention Randall. Okay. Duh. Realistically, all the ones I've just listed.
Okay.
There were nights about you know, I got a lot. Coming up, I had a lot of friends that were knights. I had friends that were masters at arms. You know, as I was getting into that upper echelon and really starting to come along. But seeing the Northern Masters almost kind of felt more like family. I also viewed it from a very, very skewed point of view, because I was a king before I was a member of chivalry.
Okay.
And I vividly recall going to certain events because I knew the players. I was coming up, you know, I'd been playing the game, and I would go to certain events as an unbelted king, and jokingly with my wife, I'm like, okay, see those 3 knights over there on that side of the hall? There is no way in God's earth they're going to swear fealty to an unbelted king. I guarantee it. We're going to be here all day, and I will bet you anything they won't swear fealty.
You win
And
that bet?
I would say 9.9 times I was right. But when I did become king, I mean, everybody just fled. I'm not saying this was a masters versus knight things. I mean, the amount of knights that showed up at my coronation was startling. I said I had a lot of friends, but I had that kind of viewpoint looking through where I was looking at people and just looking at them. And well, another example is people would swear fealty. And one particular occasion, we were packing up for an event. The event was over. We had done royal court. Everything's all set. And we're packing the car. And at this point, my wife was pregnant. And I asked a couple of guys, hey, any chance you can give us a hand packing up the car so we can get out of here and head home? And I was informed, well, we got reservations at the steakhouse down the street. I'd like to help you, but I got to go.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, okay. So when I had the choice, one of the little mental things that clicked with me is, if I do it and never say it, what's the difference?
Right.
And from my point of view is, I would rather, instead of just swearing fealty and saying the words, what if I did it at events over and over and over again? And that was the goal, one of the goals that I had.
So I grew up in the family that you helped build, right? And so when I started my household, all the members of chivalry were masters at arms.
Yep.
And I am now a knight. And you've had several squires elevated to the chivalry.
Yep.
And how do you, when they're coming up and they're thinking about it, what advice do you give in making that decision?
The main advice I give is, this is a personal choice, and 9.99 times out of 10, it's a permanent choice. Think carefully about your choice and choose what's right for you. Not for anybody else, but for you in there, what's right. Because that will be right.
So what's the difference? I know what the textbook definition is.
Yeah, we all know the textbook definition.
But just, we're gonna cover it real quick. That knights do swear fealty or are in fealty, and masters can be in fealty.
Yep.
But other than the textbook definition, what's the difference?
Besides from the fact that a master at arms can't make a knight has to hold the sword. You forgot that one. But aside from that, in my eyes, zero. That's the way I look at it. Besides the textbook ones that we've listed, To me, it's zero. If the king tells me to do something and I can do it, it's done.
Right.
It's done. You know, I've been told that I need you to sit out this Pennsic battle because we need to field senior marshals. And I looked and went, so me? He's like, yes. And I'm here to tell you, I was not happy about this. This was nothing that I wanted to do, to go out on a Pennsic field battle and just put on a hat and garb and watch and marshal. But my king told me that this is what needed to be done. And okay, I moped, I sulked, I did. And I went out and I did what I was told had to be done.
Yeah.
Now, if the king tells me I need $1 million, you're on your own. Because, you know, I could use that too. Like I said, if I can do it, it will be done.
Sure.
But to me, that's there realistically is no difference.
Okay.
Not everybody agrees with that. Everybody has their opinion. That's mine.
Dig it. Thanks, bud.
No worries.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, I mean, there's a lot of people who get made knights whom don't take their responsibilities seriously. They do the lip service of fealty. They don't do any of the work, or they do
Yep.
it when they feel like it, when it's convenient to them.
Bingo.
And they get to sort of live on the reputation of being a knight without actually having to do the work of a knight. And so, you know, if someone wants to take a baldric, has never mattered to me. I didn't understand what it was forever, but my understanding of how the SCA works now is, what kind of peer are you? Do you do the work? Do you take responsibility for the society? Do you take responsibility for your kingdom? Do you make sure that things get done when things need doing? And do you try to do it in such a way as that when other people see you do it, they want to be a part of it and they want to work with you and they want to learn from you? And, I could care less what we call any of our peers. Be that person and I'm going to respect you. And be the kind of person who treats it as it was a really cool award and then just goes back to doing whatever the hell you want to do. Then I'm not going to have the same amount of respect for you, regardless of what flavor of chivalry you are or what brand of peerage you have. Do you do the work and do you have the love and does it come out? And if not, whatever.
And
Yep.
who are you on Wednesdays?
Yeah.
Saturdays are easy. It is the easiest to be a member
Yep.
of the chivalry on a Saturday. It is
Yep.
really hard to do that stuff on Tuesdays and Wednesdays sometimes.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I hear that.
All right. I think we put a bow on that. And I really appreciate this part of the conversation. Because again, in other parts of the SCA, it's not very common. In some kingdoms, like yours, it's quite common. But even here in Aidenveld, where there's more than there are in Meridies, that more is still like maybe 2 active. And I can't remember the last time someone stuck one, not since I've lived here. So
one of the oddest sideways compliments I got was actually from Duchess Anna when she was over there with you guys. I think they were Prince and Princess at the time, and we were at an Estrella, and she introduced me to somebody who I can't recall now because this was mid-90s. And she introduced me as Sir Balfar, blah 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 from the East Kingdom and stuff, and we did all the pleasantries, and the person walked away, and I looked at Anna, I said, hey honey, in case you forgot, I'm not a knight, honey. And she looked straight up at me, went, oh honey, yes you are, and just walked away.
Perfect.
And I was just in there going, wait, forget it.
Nice. All right. So here's a little game I want to play. And
Uh-oh.
this is sort of okay. So we're back in the 90s, right? Um,
Right.
Lucan really comes into his own at this period. He's winning crowns every time he turns around.
Yep.
But also, I mean, when I was like my experiences of going to Penzic and meeting people from up in there, you know, definitely knew who Lucan was. I definitely knew who you were, Your Grace. And I knew who Hans was, and I think I remember
Okay.
seeing Timothy, but I wasn't. My understanding of Timothy really wasn't until a little bit later. You know, when I started seeing some of the other work that he was doing in other areas. But who else? So we understand that Stefan Von Dresden, he was starting to stand out in the late 90s.
Forgot
But
about Gregor.
Gregor.
Gregor was
well,
big. Still is.
yeah, I remember getting hit by him once, but I think that's probably why I don't remember springing him up because I don't
I was gonna
remember
say, do you
anything
remember
about
after
the
that?
experience. I just remember the stars.
Nah. Gregor, I mean, in that time period, he was the man. There's no doubt. He and I had some really fun knockdown dragouts. I've respected him since I've met him. You know,
Nice.
I was still a squire when we were competing against each other, like in melee tournaments and stuff. And I've had nothing but respect for the man for my entire SCA career.
So for you, Brennan, since you
Hmm.
weren't really a major player in the 90s,
Hmm.
maybe you were in elementary school, who knows?
I
Um,
I uh, I started the SCA in the late 90s.
Okay. So you're going to be working almost entirely from other people's experiences and how that has sort of measured you. But who do you think won the decade? Who won the 90s in the East
Ooh,
as a fighter?
man. Uh, I think you have two of the names on that list that it's really tough to argue against in Lucan and Gregor.
Hmm.
And as Lucan's squire, I'm going to default to saying the boss wins.
Okay.
But you know, that's totally biased.
That's totally
But
fair. You know,
not
there's
totally
not
wrong
any
either.
real history being made here with these answers, so it's okay that you can be biased. Your Grace Balfar, who do
Yeah.
you think won the 90s?
Oh, it was definitely Lucan.
Okay.
Oh no, without a
So
doubt.
so what about Lucan made him different back then? And I understand the winning, but you know, I think it goes beyond the winning.
Oh, it was. It wasn't the winning. It was the innovation. He figured out new ways of throwing shots
Hmm.
when you're carrying a sword and shield. That was one of the ways that he would win. Is he would walk up. I watched him walk into a major tournament, walk in, size somebody up, throw two fakes, one shot, fight was over. And it isn't like that was a fluke.
Right.
You know, that was a
And
semi-common thing. You know, I mean, it got to the point with us fighting when he'd come in, he'd set his feet a certain way, and I just take two steps back, and we'd stand there and laugh at each other because I already knew what he was throwing. But
so
I
to
would have to
me,
say like I said, the innovation of
Okay.
how we're playing this game. You know, people are getting hit from places that are just like, what the heck was that? How in God's name did you hit me there that hard? Because I know I'm limping for the next 3 days. But how did you hit me there?
So was he predominantly a right foot forward fighter during this period too?
It all depends on what fight he was in.
Okay.
No, he would switch up his footwork. He would switch up his stance. It really depended upon his opponent.
by the late 90s, he was teaching us right foot forward.
Okay.
And he did a lot of right foot forward. But once again, it depended upon the fighter, and where he was trying to get to.
So what do you guys call that? We called it goofy foot. What do you guys call it?
Yeah, same.
Okay. Didn't know if it was a
Uh,
universal term.
It was called Goofy Foot. I now teach it as Sword Foot.
Okay.
That's because you're goofy.
True story, buddy.
Yeah, now it's goofy foot up here too.
All right. Well, let's transcend into the aughts, the 2000s. So I'll just throw my list up, and hopefully it won't be as bad as where I forgot Ronald from the previous one. But let's see here. We have Eastern Dukes made in the 2000s: Andreas, Darius, Galfred Kelson, Brian, but I got an asterisk by that because he came into the East of Duke.
Yeah,
So,
nah,
you
he's
know,
an asterisk.
that's almost a cheat there because he was already a Duke. And then Conrad and Griffith. But hopefully no one will correct me that I'm forgetting somebody, but why don't we start off as a starting point there, and we talk a little bit about these names and these fighters, and then we'll talk about who's not on this list that we need to keep on our list of important fighters from the period.
So I think this is everybody that when I was writing my notes, and I did not go through who won crown. I just was like, in 2000s, who do we need to talk about? And this is everybody but one name that I wrote. So I think
cheated.
you
I
have
got the list in front of me.
So who's missing off this list that and I know this is my list is just people who, you know, won the tournament and then got the Ducal scroll at the end of it, but the list of important fighters, who do you have that's not on here?
looking up the tree at the guys who were the generation ahead of me or two generations ahead of me. The only name I would add is Lars Wolfsblood.
Okay.
Okay.
And then you know, Stefan should probably just also be all the way through this as well, because I definitely remember him through this period.
Oh yeah, Stefan was really prominent. In this period, you had another person who gets there, but in this time period is pretty much a force to be reckoned with, which was Kenrick.
Right. He got his duchy in the next decade, but he was coming up and becoming somebody through this period. That's cool. All right. Well, I mean, just anywhere you guys want to start. Brennan, you can even drive here for a bit. Let's pick a name and highlight them and kind of talk about what they brought to the kingdom.
So I think you can't talk about the 90s to me without starting with Andreas, Ice Falcon. And he being in Jersey, he was such a force. He was SCA fighting in the south of the East Kingdom and was recruiting and was armoring and was equipping folks and just was doing it all and really just made such a mark on fighting culture in the kingdom that I feel like there may have been others who are equally talented, but to not start the 2000s by talking about Ice is just a disservice to all that he's done.
Right. Large household, you know, influence on the kingdom, influence on, you know, the SCA for sure.
Before I ever got started in the SCA, I started Red Bears and I got a flyer from Ice Falcon. Do you want to join Bloodguard and fight in the SCA?
Well, yeah, nice. So he won his first crown in 2000 and his second one in 2002. But I definitely remember him on the throne, even as a, you know, deep South foreigner myself. So, you know, they stood out. Him and Isabella definitely stood out as really striking crowns too.
Sure. And,
without a doubt.
Yeah, Isabella is just a force of nature.
And how? Woo! I love her, but that girl comes in the room like a tornado.
Nobody misses.
We had one of those down where I was from too, Duchess. Alyssa, another sort of comes into the room and everyone's like, okay, Alyssa's here.
Yep. Oh yeah, when Isabella came in the room, everybody knew it.
And I
All right.
think
So,
what
yeah, go ahead.
one of the things that really, for me as a kid, defined this period was there were like a few sets of finals that went back and forth year after year, and it segues perfectly into Darius, because
Yep.
Darius and Ice going back, they just measured themselves against one another over and over and over, and really to the mattresses they went.
Well, tell me what a fight with them looks like, because I know Ice's style, and I know Darius's style, but I've never seen them fight. Even though I've fought them both, but what does it look like when they're going at each other?
Darius's style has evolved so much over the years that you wouldn't recognize their fights back then.
Okay.
I mean, Darius, like I said, his style's completely changed over the years. That they did fight a very similar style, and I mean, just thunder.
Yeah. For a while, they were both fighting heaters with hang guards. And nowadays, I believe that last time I saw him, Darius was fighting a basically kite and longsword.
I
So
thought, didn't he switch to a Madu?
I can't keep track, man.
Yeah, I lost track too, honestly. I thought I saw him with a Madu one of the last times. Maybe I'm wrong. But like I say, his style does constantly change. But Ice has always been Ice.
Yep. And I think one of the things that marked their Balfar said that marked their fights was it was thunder. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew that these two were going to go and put themselves in a crucible, and you needed to stay 6 feet back and keep your hands and legs inside the ride at all times.
All
Because parts
times,
were coming
baby.
off.
Yep.
Parts were coming off.
Yeah, those two were going to keep swinging until somebody was laying on the ground.
Well, nice. So that's, we've got Ice, and then we've got Darius. So let's move on in and keep talking about some more.
So the
Well,
rest
and
of
another one I wanted to bring up that
Yeah.
was fairly influential in the period per se, but never got his duchy was Thorson.
Sure.
Okay.
Thorson will
mean-
tell you he got it right the first time, so he didn't need to do it a second time.
Or he'll tell you he was smart enough to quit after the first one.
Yeah.
But he was another one that influenced a lot of people coming up.
Okay. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about his style and what set him apart.
What exactly do you call his shield shape, Brennan?
I call it a coffin. So it's skinny at the top, skinny at the bottom. It's almost a kite. It's wide in the middle, so it looks almost like a coffin.
I always refer to it as a double diamond with the tips cut off at the top and the bottom.
Yeah, but you can sort of imagine that the classic coffin shape, only instead of it being widest at the shoulders, it's widest at the hips.
Okay.
It's a really odd shape. It's narrow and tall.
Yeah.
And between no, go ahead, Brennan.
And I think one of the things he did really well was and he still does really well, frustratingly so, is control the range on people. It's not just about what his stick is going to do. It's more and more about what his feet are going to do to you.
Sure.
And I mean, all the greats do that, but that really sticks out to me. Like with Thorson, um, I don't feel like there was ever a magic shot that he had. It was just he's
Nope.
doing the fundamentals better than the next guy.
And with the odd shape of his shield, offside shots could come anywhere.
Sure.
I mean, he'd throw an offside from behind that shield and hit you in the leg. Because he would pull that thing from one side of his body to the other and was just like, where the heck is he going now?
Right.
But just such an odd style. And it was funny because some people he would have, it would almost, you'd watch him, he'd almost be totally frustrated with certain people. And other people, he'd just walk up to and just annihilate them because his style was so weird. The style match would just, it's just weird.
Let's see.
But I
Who's
wanted to throw
next up?
him in as far as like people that were important in that era.
So from a training perspective, are there changes or advances in how we're training from the 90s to the aughts? You know, are there collegiums or, you know, people who are putting together things more like classes and materials for it? Or are we still kind of in a, you go to fighter practice and hope you get better mode?
I think in this period is where we started actually gathering together and having practices and in some case small events sort of like built on teaching.
Okay.
And actually another influential guy that never won a crown was Arnwolf. And he actually in this era or right before put out a tactics manual for melee tactics.
It was in the 90s because I like my second practice, I was handed a copy of it.
That's what I said. That's what I said. I thought it was previous to the 2000s, but all through there, Arn was traveling around teaching. Farrell was doing a lot of traveling around teaching then too. And
So
that's
there was a
when,
lot. There was a
ahead.
lot of, for me, there was a lot more teaching happening. There was a ton of teaching happening at an army level that there was not necessarily happening at a singles level. Like, so you went to practice, you went out there, you got shown some things, you got good enough to be a foot soldier, and then we taught you how to be an excellent foot soldier. We taught you how to be a sergeant. But there was not the same organized teaching in terms of how to fight singles really effectively. That continued to be one-on-one training, and I think by and large it still continues to be that.
Okay.
that's more like your fighter practice training is your singles work.
Yeah.
And you bring your singles up good enough so that you would go to these big melee practices or these collegiums and stuff and try to take what you learned with singles and put it in a melee situation.
Sure. I mean, you guys are just so driven by melee.
Yep.
It's the whole notion of you work your prowess so that you can be better at melee is not really done a lot of other places. There's a few kingdoms because they also have a very war, you know, or melee kind of driven ethos. But in most other kingdoms, you know, prowess is for prowess's sake. And, you know, you do the 1 or 2 war events a year, maybe. So you guys have an actual kind of a culture that is really got a foundational component because of how important war is.
To the point that it became that we lost our tournament culture. We had a war season, and war season started with, oddly enough, Balfar's challenge in April and ran right through Penzik. And then you had a couple tournaments sprinkled in there, but the spring and summer was about building the army to meet the dragon,
Yep.
and that's what it was. And then I think we sort of swung. Well, we'll get to this, but we swung back the other way, and now I think we're finding a middle ground.
Yeah.
And that really did come all the way through the 90s and into the aughts. The whole notion that you are getting better to fight at Pennsic, to be a good melee fighter. I think one of the things that drove it a lot is a lot of people came to realize that I'm probably never going to win a crown. Your average Joe fighter is I'm probably not going to win a crown. And chances are I'm not going to be able to get knighted for various mundane or whatever reasons, or even the thought that that's a little beyond my reach. But I can get good at fighting with people. And I can get together with 4 of my buddies.
Right.
And we can be an effective unit and have people notice us.
That was 100% my motivation for the first 5 years.
Well, and I really like melee, but I'm not driven the same way I think people are who come up with, from melee cultures. People in the Outlands and Aidenvelt have a very strong war culture, and you get good so you can go fight in Australia, kind of a thing.
Yep.
I don't think it holds a candle. I mean, I think it's important, but I don't think it holds a candle to the mid-realm East experience of let's freaking get ready for Pennsic, because Pennsic's a super, Pennsic's the life. I mean, it's
You're
so
not wrong.
So
Not
I mean,
wrong.
and you can see that when you travel across the world and you make friends from these various kingdoms and stuff, and but one of the things that being really big into your regional or your kingdom army is how good it feels to be both a part of something, because you can brag about your unit.
Yep.
It is a complete lack of humility, something I'm very familiar with, to talk about how much ass you kicked in the tournament. But you can go on for weeks talking about how much ass your unit kicked. It's, you can be proud of it. You can write songs about it. You can do all the things that you can't do talking about your own prowess.
Yeah. And I think if you asked my wife to keep only one award, she has a unit prowess award, and I bet you if you asked her, that would be the one award she kept, and she'd give back her duchy.
No, that's great. I mean, and it's important, and it builds relationships that a lot of other kingdoms don't have. A lot of other fighters in other kingdoms don't have. They don't have that shared experience of the preparing for that 2 weeks a year.
Well,
so
and
real quick,
the other thing is by spending all that time trying to develop your unit, you also have that special pleasure of being able to share that victory that you have. You're not just standing there out in the field going, yeah, I kicked his butt. There's 4 or 5 of you all going back and forth to each other because you all helped each other.
Yeah.
You've kind of gone through that crucible as a group. And you can sit there and say, listen, we rolled up on this group of 4 knights and we kicked their butt.
So before we get too far from the 90s, I do have to bring up one little Pennsic story. One of my favorite things to do on the pickup fields after I got knighted and was running around was I would introduce people that I knew either from Meridies or from other kingdoms, not from the area, to some of the fighters that I had made friends with up there and that I knew. And one of those guys was an East Realm guy who looked like total shit. I mean, he looked so bad that everyone, when they saw him and I was like, man, you got to fight this guy, they were like, oh, are you kidding me? You're sending me out to fight that scrub? And I'd be like, no. They're like, well, he's not even wearing shoes.
Can I guess the name?
Go fight him. They're like, I'll go kick this.
Unshod.
I'll go kick this guy's ass. I used to love sicking people on Wolfstone and then have him do his crazy I'm out of range and now I'm in range and I've got this 24-inch stick and I am just going to whomp the crap out of you. Here comes some offsides you would never expect. I used to love just making people make terrible judgment mistakes by trying to judge a book by the cover with him.
Yep. As soon as you were talking about looking like crap and a scrub, I'm like, I think I already know where he's going. Yeah.
What a really good guy. For those in the SCA who haven't had the experience, you know, just because someone looks like crap does not mean they're not going to kick your ass.
It's
He
funny.
still
That's the
kicks
whole
my butt.
theory of our Northern Army. When we
All
started
right.
the Northern Army, I mean, you would not believe a more motley collection of crap armor you ever saw in your life. And we
I mean,
would
there
just,
probably wasn't a restaurant within 100 miles or 200 miles that had any pickle barrel left.
No. You know, you are mistaken there, sir. There wasn't a car wash anywhere within 100 miles that had any soap barrels left.
Okay. Big blue barrels, huh?
We preferred the black ones, but you know, the blue would do for doing a pinch. The white ones were still preferred to the blue ones, though. There was a guy back in the, I want to say 80s, had made scale mail out of a blue barrel, maybe 90s. But this particular fellow was walking out onto the Penzic field, and you just heard this little child's voice, that little earnest voice that you always catch from a kid sometimes, that just rings out, and you just heard, "Mommy, look, it's Smurf Warrior." Oh my God, we never saw that armor again, ever. And ever since then, blue barrels, it's like, well, if you get them, you'd better cover that.
Yeah.
There's a precedence that's been set for that color blue.
Okay, so we need to jump into the tins, or we're not gonna get much further this evening. We are starting to run out of time. But real quick, guys,
Okay.
we'll start with Balfar. Who won the aughts?
I'm looking through the list now.
Well, and we have to remember Lucan's still kicking ass and taking names during this period too. So just because
to a
they
degree,
didn't win their duchy,
but he's starting to get distracted at this point. In the tens. Okay, I'm looking at the list now.
Not yet. The aughts. We'll get to the tens in a second.
We're still in the aughts.
Who won the aughts?
I would have to say, Ice, Andre.
All right. Good answer.
Seconded.
All right, Brennan.
Seconded.
Okay. Well, then no debate there. Let's jump into the tens. I'll flash the name of the royals. Made Duke during this period was Edward, Henrik, Brennan, and I have Giannis, but I have it as a little kind of an asterisk there because he got his duchy in 21, but we're not going to be able to.
He's still His Majesty now for his second reign.
Right.
Okay. So hasn't got his
Technically,
duchy.
he's not a duke yet.
Technically.
Very technically.
But he can swing a stick real good.
Oh,
He sure can.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's talk about the tens. This is your period, Brennan. You're coming of age here.
So I think it is, for me, I looked up to Edward and Kenrick like nobody's business. Those two were just not only what you wanted to be in a fighter, but what you wanted to be in a knight, what you wanted to be in a man. And just great human beings, great fighters, just great. And so I think they set a lot of the tenor as the Lucans and the Andreases and the Gregors and Balfar, and some of the other folks took a step back. Older kids, more careers, what have you. Took a step back from fighting. Edward and Kenrick drove a lot of the what was fighting culture in the kingdom. Andreas
Okay.
is still around. He's still absolutely a big part of it. Darius is still around. He's still absolutely a big part of it. But I think those four shaped a lot of the culture as we came into this time.
Yeah,
Excellent.
this is the period of time where my mundane life kind of took over. And I was having I realistically couldn't get Penzic off. There was, I think, 5-6 years where I just couldn't get that time off of work.
Are you allowed to be in the SCA in the East Kingdom if you can't go to Penzic?
You can, but you kind of got to hide your face every now and again.
Ouch.
You're kind of like the lesser because you weren't able to make Penzic.
Right.
You're the second class shiv.
That's the drawback on having something because such a pinnacle and so
Yep.
important.
Yeah.
It really is too, because especially when you, like in my case, I knew I couldn't go. My job, the vacation with picks were done by seniority, and I knew I did not have enough to get early August off.
Right.
So whenever I went to an event, for me, it was more like, well, I guess I'm teaching.
I think there's one other, everybody who knows me is going to yell bias from the rooftops, but there's one other name that really bears conversation here, which is Colin.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not
and-
biased there. No.
Well, I
Everybody
think
who
of you
knows
two
me-
together. I really do. I mean, in my mind, I kind of associate you guys, because I saw you traveling together, and I kind of met you
He would-
together. So
He was absolutely and still is my best friend and my training partner. We're at practice together on Wednesday. It's still the thing, but he's the one who's like everybody that's on this list is a sword and shield primary.
mhm.
Absolutely has weapons depth, but he's a glaive guy and a war god and multi-time warlord for Penzic. And so I think that while we're talking about this last generation, I think I'd be wrong if I didn't bring him up.
No, and I think it's perfectly fair. And definitely props to him. So looking back just a little bit, let's just kind of, for those people who may not know them, Edward is tall and strong and, can really bring the heat, but has a lot of speed with it as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I feel like he's a technical fighter and very thoughtful. Henrik has a little bit of had a little bit of athletic, sort of almost, natural athleticism and how he moved. I don't know if he was, if he actually was, but how he moved and how he fought with the way he would bend his knees and move and keep his center of gravity pretty much in a really good neutral position at all times. I mean, I loved watching him fight as much as I enjoyed fighting him.
You know what's really funny is having known Kenrick from when he first showed up in the SCA.
Yeah.
Your whole theory of just his natural athletic ability, he had almost none.
So it just
None.
really manifested as a fighter.
He learned and worked his butt off for everything that he had as far as fighting in the SCA is concerned. When he first showed up, I mean, he was bad. I mean,
That's
he
actually a
was.
really good story. It's important to know that because,
Yeah.
when you're a new fighter and you're struggling, it's important to know that, you don't have to be a natural athlete. You just have to put in the work, and
Exactly.
you might
With
have the
Kenrick-
opportunity to get better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with Kenrick, it was all work. In fact, before he got knighted, he was mostly known for being a herald.
He was our
with
Kingdom
a
Herald
lot of
prior
his
to being
principal. What was that?
I said he was our Kingdom Herald probably prior to being knighted.
Yes, but that was where a lot of his energies and stuff were always directed, was into herald, into being a herald, a court herald, and everything else. and he was awesome. And as far as I said, as far as fighting is concerned, he worked and worked and worked, never let up, always trying to better himself as far as fighting goes.
Nice.
Which is why I thought it was interesting, your comment about him seeming to have this natural athletic ability. And there was nothing natural about that. That boy worked for it.
He
Well, I'm
just
glad I
studied.
brought it up that way so that you guys could correct me, because I think it is super important to know that, you know, there is a place for hard work. And there are rewards to be got from it. So,
Oh, and
yeah,
how?
no, but I mean, I guess he was a really good fighter when I first met him, and everything seemed like it was a deliberate and almost instinctive movement from this part. So,
Yeah, it
yeah,
was just
someone's,
drilled. It was drilled in. It wasn't. There was nothing instinctive.
Yep. And I said, it was literally just years and years of hard work, determination, and just and never letting it ever get him down.
Mhm.
No matter how bad something went. I mean, I spent a long time teasing him because, as most of my friends know, I am probably the worst chivalry sword and shield fighter there is. I might put that out kingdom wide, maybe. I suck. I mean, you strap a shield onto my arm, and I don't know.
It makes your arm useless.
It does. It really does. I mean, I can block with it if you throw in that area, but aside from that, I really suck with it. And to date, in the 5 crowns that I finaled in, Kenrick is the only sword and shield fight I ever won. And it was only because he was trying to fake me out, and I was just trying to not look like a fool and get one-shotted, and I hit him by accident.
It's funny you
But
say
even
that, Your
that,
Grace, because
he
Visible
never
sat
let
there
that
and told
get
us the
him
same
down.
thing last month. He said he was the worst sword and shield knight.
Ooh, that's
Let's
a good. That's a good race.
Who was the name? I missed the name.
Biz.
Oh, I've honestly never seen Viz with a shield on his arm. I don't know. That
He
might
said
be
he
a
was
good
pretty
race.
bad.
Yeah. But like even me teasing him about that, he never let it get him down. He just worked harder and harder and harder.
That's great. That's really a good thing. So, why don't you keep your mouth closed for a little bit, Brennan, and we'll let Balfar talk about Duke Brennan, who won 3 crowns in this period, and also has made his mark on the kingdom and has been a profound influence both there, but also elsewhere in the known world. Uh, let's talk about that
Okay.
guy for just a sec.
Okay. So we got to start with this certain squire that used to run around and, I wouldn't say cause trouble, because he was smart enough not to get caught. And he was getting good. I mean, he was really getting good. And a lot of us were looking at him going, you know, this boy is really working it. And then it just, to me, it felt like a lightning bolt when I heard Brennan 1 crown. I was like, he did what? And my second thought is remembering all those years of that squire I used to tease, and went, oh man, I am going to die in the next 6 months. This is going to be bad. He's going to make me pay. But all of a sudden, Brennan exploded on the scene and just never slowed down. Either he was winning crown, he was influencing, you know, working with people, winning crown, he was running things. We also should bring up the simple fact that the first crown he won was the day he got knighted.
Before or after?
I was
Brennan?
knighted in the morning.
There you
I
go.
received my writ from Gregor and Kenna at Pensick, and then Kenrick and Avelina knighted me that morning, and I had a very good afternoon.
Oh,
That's a good day.
that's what we're gonna call that, a good afternoon.
That's what we're gonna call that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, I've never seen you at that kind of a loss for words. Usually we have a hard time keeping you quiet. But anyways,
You're in rare air there, Your Grace, because I also know someone who received their accolade and then went and won their crown. It was so funny. Hadi, the aspirant from down south in Meridies, and he had also been in Atlantia. He aspired to two things and he achieved them on the same day. And it's like, well, do you need to change your name? I mean,
yeah.
And Laurel and Darksbane, Once Upon a Time.
Oh,
I
I
really?
think you're in a good club.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty auspicious club. So, anyways, like I said, once Brennan got there, you couldn't not see him doing something. He was kind of a constant man on a mission for the kingdom.
Right.
If it was something that needed to be done, regardless of what it was, either he was getting it done or he knew the person that could get it done and got it done.
Well, that's my very
Including into the
definition of a
point where-
peer.
And also including to the point working with the Seneschal.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, once he hit the scene, that was it. He was there and hit the ground running and constantly working towards things.
Good dude. His
And
mouth can get him in trouble some, but he's a good dude.
Mouth gets me in
Some?
trouble some. Yeah.
some,
Speaking your mind seems like it's the right thing to do, but maybe not always.
but that's my take on Brennan.
Do you have anything to add, Brennan?
That was awkward and humbling, and thank you.
Okay, here, let's make it a little easier. You're still a jerk.
True story. I learned
All
it
right.
from you.
Well, let's see if he votes for himself. Who won the decade?
Okay, this once again is completely biased.
Yeah.
Completely and utterly biased. Kenrick.
No question.
Well,
And I'll tell you, it's a completely biased choice, but it is what it is. I'm calling it.
Yeah.
He's definitely an amazing dude for sure, and he will be missed.
I think from an overall SCA perspective, I think Kenrick wins the decade. From a Rattan only perspective, I think Edward wins the decade.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you that. Yeah.
Well, we'll put both their names on the imaginary scroll we're making.
There you go.
There can be a tie.
All right, I'll take it.
I mean, not to keep hammering the subject, but Kenrick got to the point where, like I said, the guy that could barely fight when he showed up, where I still have a picture of a melee where he's out there with a spear and I'm covering him because he's whooping so much butt that I'm just trying to keep people off of him. And this is a guy who's starting out, like I said, was a herald that could kind of fight.
It's an amazing success story. I hate that it ends tragically, but his influence can continue to live on with everyone that he was around. And from my perspective, from just having met him a number of times and been just, profoundly impressed with, how he carried himself and how he cared about his lady and cared about the SCA in general and how much he very much loved his kingdom. So, don't want to necessarily leave on a downer, but this has been an amazing hour and a half. It has been such a pleasure to get to just gab with you, Your Grace Balfar, and to talk about um, such an amazing kingdom, such a rich history, and so many different types and kinds of historical figures that have made up this kingdom over its 40 plus years now, 50 years. Um, it's such a weird and distinct pleasure just to get to learn from where I'm sitting about the guests that come on and the kingdom. And so I'm just so grateful that you could take time to join us here on our weird little geeky uh, podcast stream or whatever it is.
I think weird is a very good description of our kingdom.
Well, the SCA is pretty freaking weird to begin with. So you're working pretty hard if you're going to be the weird kingdom. The People's Republic of the East.
There you go.
Long live the People's Republic.
Your Grace Brennan, thanks a million. I really appreciate the last two episodes where you've joined me and you've helped me sort of make sense of this very weird but really super cool kingdom. And thanks a ton.
Oh, it's been absolutely my pleasure. I am a big Eastern fanboy, if nothing else.
One of the things that's impressed me as well, though, is how interested you are just in the SCA in general and meeting people from other kingdoms and learning and stuff. So I've asked His Grace Brennan if he would step up and be kind of a full-time host with me on Heroes and Traditions. And, he made the mistake of saying yes earlier. So I'm going to do everything I can to bring him aboard, and we'll do more episodes together. And, in a month from now, we're going to have an opportunity to learn about the early days of your dreaded rivals, the Middle.
I am so excited for that. That gives me a great deal of pleasure. Annual enemies, eternal friends, and
Bingo.
Greatest rival that we get to test ourselves against.
So I'm a terrible host because I don't know what next week is, so I can't do a bump for it. But I will give props to our producer, Sir Thorold Fieldwood. You did a great job of herding us cats, and that's our episode for this evening. Thank you guys so much. We look forward to seeing you again as soon as we can on A Coach's Corner. So have a great weekend, everybody.